This Equipment World video is brought to you by Chevron Delo 600 ADF Ultra Low Ash Diesel Engine Oil. It's time to kick some ash. Hi everybody, welcome back to Equipment World. You're watching The Dirt. I'm your host Brian, and today we're going to talk about a topic that is on everybody's mind right now. How do we raise prices? Because we all have to raise prices right now. We've got inflation going like crazy. We've got supply shortages. We've got diesel going up to God knows how much a gallon. We have to raise prices. It's not an option at this point. So this can be a really daunting conversation to have just with yourself, especially if you're new to the industry and you haven't dealt with these issues before. How do you raise prices without totally scaring your customers off? How do you have that conversation that, look, I'm sorry I bid that 6 months ago at this price, but I'm going to have to increase it 20%. That's a really daunting task, especially if you're not familiar with doing it. So let's talk about that today. But before we get into that, I want to take a second to tell you about the sponsor of this video, Chevron Lubricants. Protecting your diesel engine and its exhaust aftertreatment system has traditionally been seen as an either-or proposition when it comes to choosing the engine oil that's going to protect your system. And that's exactly why Chevron spent more than a decade of R&D work developing a no-compromise formulation. Now, I don't have to tell you why a clogged DPF is bad news, but here's the real kick in the pants. 90% of that ash clogging up your DPF and then upping your fuel and maintenance costs, it comes from your engine oil. You might be thinking, why don't they make an engine oil with less ash in it then? You'll be happy to learn that Chevron agrees with you. They've developed a new ultra low ash diesel engine oil that is specifically designed to combat DPF ash clogging. Delo 600 ADF with OmniMax technology cuts sulfate ash by 60%, radically reducing the rate of DPF clogging and extending the DPF service life by 2.5 times. Before you had to choose between protecting your engine or your aftertreatment system. Now you don't. Delo 600 ADF with OmniMax technology. It's time to kick some ash. The first thing I'm going to say is, you're not the only one raising prices. So if you're super stressed out because you're having to go back to Mrs. Smith and say, look, I've got to increase my prices by 20%, you're not the only one in the industry doing that. Everybody's having to do that. And if they aren't having to do that, one of two things is occurring. The first is, they gave Mrs. Smith an overly inflated price back 6 months ago when they quoted her on this job, and they're taking her to the cleaners. Or what's happening is you've got these guys that refuse to raise prices because they think they're going to gobble up all this work. In reality, they're going to end up going out of business, or they're just going to screw their customers and walk away from the jobs because they realize, hey, there's no margin here. It's not worth it. So ultimately, you raising prices is not going to price you out of the market. You're not suddenly going to have all of your business dry up, because everyone's experiencing the same pains that you are. So just kind of collectively breathe a sigh of relief there on that note. Now comes the conversation of how do we approach this topic? Well, first of all, fuel is going up for everyone, and that's a very easy thing to deal with. You can absolutely start adding on fuel surcharges to your jobs, whether it's 15 or 20% of, whatever the amount is you deem that's going to be appropriate for your job. Just put it in as a fuel surcharge. I don't know of anyone in this day and age that would really raise their eyebrows too hard at a fuel surcharge, because most homeowners, most of your customers are all familiar with the fact that diesel is going through the roof right now. So it's not going to be that big of a deal to see a fuel surcharge. In fact, at this point, I would say most people expect to see that. Now, how do we handle materials? Well, first of all, if you've already bid a job, I do think you owe it to your customer. If you think there's a good likelihood they're going to go forward, fire off a phone call and just inform them of the situation. Look, material prices are changing at a rapid rate. I can't do the job for the original bid. I would be more than happy to send out a rebid if you guys decide to go forward with the project. My policy, always, in all aspects of business, is to be honest and upfront with your customer. Because if you're honest and upfront, the customer will see it as you being honest, and they will be understanding. Now, if you wait until you show up to the job and then on the backside of it go, oh, hey, by the way, Mrs. Smith, that's going to be an additional $1,700 for that job that, we just completed. Now you're not being honest at all. Mrs. Smith sees you as being a total shyster, and you're probably going to lose all of her business and all of her friends' business, and she's probably going to come after you. So, general rule of thumb is always be upfront and honest with your customers. Now, for new bids that you're completing, again, fuel prices are going like crazy. We have all of these supply shortages that are causing prices to fluctuate rapidly. That's actually pretty straightforward as well. First of all, again, be honest with your customer. When you go out and do the bid, have a very forward conversation with your customer that, hey, the landscape is changing at a daily rate right now. There's a good chance I'm going to have to rebid this here in the next even 3 to 4 weeks. And then you actually put that on your bid. Quote is good until, and then put a date on that quote so that your customer knows if they sit around and they hem and haw about a job, that's going to materially change the price of the stuff that's going into that job. Now, that's also a very upfront and honest way to handle that situation to where it's not a surprise to your customer when they call you in 6 weeks and say, all right, we're ready to move forward. And you fire back with, well, hang on a second, now it's going to be $1,700 more. Again, as a customer, I'm going to throw my hands up if you handle it that way. But if you handle it straightforward at the forefront of the job, it's really not that big of a deal. So really, what are we looking at to increase prices on? Well, the two main things right now are fuel and materials. And we can very easily figure out how much our materials have gone up by, right? Because those are physical prices. We can call up to whoever our supplier is, and we can very easily get a reprice on everything. And then we can forward that over to the customer with updated pricing on our bid. That's really straightforward. And again, put the caveat in there. These prices are only good for 2 weeks or 4 weeks. You decide what works for your business, and then you put that on the quote. Make sure it's not this tiny fine print at the bottom. Make it obvious. So again, you're being above board. You're being honest with your customer. Now, fuel prices are a totally different story. And in all honesty, that's where I'm just going to say you need to put a fuel surcharge on your job. There's not really any getting around it right now. Fuel prices are probably going to remain pretty high, at least for the next couple of months. We just need to put a fuel surcharge on there. And that's a very straightforward thing. At the end of your bid, say, hey, this is what it was normally going to be. There's going to be an additional fuel surcharge of X amount. And you put that right there on the bid. Make it plain as day for the customer to see so that it's not this nebulous number. It's not this giant unknown. The customer can see, look, this is the impact of inflation. This is the impact of fuel prices. It's not some mystical number that you've pulled out of your behind. I, as a customer, can see why I'm getting charged more for this job, and it's directly related to fuel prices. Now, again, back to being honest. What was our big beef with the airlines back in 2008 after the recession finally moved through? When was that? Around 2010, 11, somewhere in there. The airlines, remember, they told us they were going to charge us for bags, and then as soon as the fuel came back down, oh, we'll do away with the baggage fees. Never happened, right? And now we all have this silent grudge as we stand in line at security, secretly hating the airlines for going back on their word and bending us over the table. Don't be that guy with your business. Customers are going to pay attention to what fuel prices do. And as soon as fuel prices come back down to a reasonable level, you need to stop putting the fuel surcharge on there. Now, does that mean you can't work your fuel surcharge into your numbers so that it doesn't really show up and it's a little more hidden? Yes. Now, you run the risk of overbidding the job and bidding yourself out of that work. But at the same time, if you really need that extra cushion that you had bid in with the fuel surcharge, there are ways to insert that back into the pricing. But that being said, as soon as fuel prices come back down, you do need to make sure you drop that fuel surcharge off. Because me as a customer, I'm going to look at that and say, this guy's charging me a fuel surcharge even though diesel's back to what it was before this whole Ukraine-Russia thing started. And I'm not going to trust you. So I guess really the summary of this video is, if you have a relationship with your customer where you have established trust, raising prices, is it going to cost you some jobs? Absolutely. There's no getting around it, because at the end of the day, people have firm budgets on their projects. Some people have a little flex. A lot of people have some flex. A lot of people are going to be understanding of the circumstances and will proceed forward with the project. Likewise, though, you have some people that are on very firm budgets, and those people just can't afford to go through with the job. And that's where you as a contractor just need to accept that some of these jobs are going to have to wait. But that shouldn't stop you or make you fret about raising prices on your jobs to keep up with inflation, to keep up with supply shortages, and to keep up with the fuel prices we're experiencing now. So as always, I hope this has been helpful. I hope it's giving you a little more confidence as you go forward and you do start to react to the happenings of the economy right now. I will say this. If you've got additional ideas or thoughts on how to raise prices as a contractor, absolutely drop them in the comments below. Help your fellow contractors out as we all kind of struggle our way through this whole economic crisis. That may be a bit of a strong word, but this whole economic thing we're working through right now. Let's help each other out as we move forward. We'll catch you guys on the next episode of The Dirt.